Welcome to In Conversation, presented by The Future of Art. In a world of fleeting headlines and quick takes, we dive deep. Here we unravel the intricacies of the mind, the philosophies, and the passions of our guests. We believe in the art of conversation, in the magic that happens when you go beyond the surface. So join me, your host, Ayla El-Moussa, as we wade into the minds of some incredible individuals. Welcome to episode 3 of In Conversation. Today I am thrilled to have a fascinating chat with two brilliant artists, Ben Strauss and Michael Sidofsky. We will be exploring their passion for photography, their use of light painting, and their idea for the futures of Web3. Join us as we delve into what keeps their wonder and creativity alive.
I want to obviously introduce Michael and Ben, Mind's Eye and Ben Strauss. You two are incredible artists that I really respect, and I'm excited to listen to you both converse, and also I'll prompt with some questions because I would love to hear your answers on all of them. But what I noticed about you both, vastly different in terms of style, but I find that you both paint with light in different ways. I feel like, Ben, you use physics and gravity to create this incredible story and weaving, if you will. And Michael, you, I feel, are a master of light and storytelling, where you can basically take an image and you laser focus us into this incredible scene. So I think my first question to you both is, as photographers, do you feel like you're capturing reality, or do you feel like you're creating it?
I mean, Ben's work was current project with the pendulum swing is quite different from the work that I've been doing, and also like the landscape work. Ben has always worked on. That's how we actually met each other, through landscape photography. But yeah, I mean, my work represents my reality, I guess, at any given time in my life. It's seen through, I guess, the filter. Or my filter, and that's like how I want to present it to you. It's just, the photos are my observations of the world, and then how I want to show them to the viewers is it's kind of like this ever evolving filter again, I guess. Which yeah, it's like there's a little bit of a fantasy to it. There's a little bit of like influence, how I want you to feel when you look at it, and that all kind of comes through. The way I shoot each scene, how I process it, the colors I use, the way I light it. So, but it's very much reality, but it's also very much my reality.
Obviously, with the like Michael said, with the pendulum stuff, I'm shooting like what's happening in the moment, and just using light to make that invisible visible. So that project's all about being as what's the word I'm looking for? I guess purist as possible, which is pretty much it's a pretty big transition from what I do with my landscape photography, where I capture these moments in time in real landscapes. And this is where I think Michael and I actually have a lot in common with our styles, and I'll let him, if he wants to disagree, that's fine. But when it comes to like the way we both light bleed and accentuate and paint on top of our raw photographs, that's kind of a lot what I do with the landscape, where I capture something real in front of me and then spend most of the time in post-processing inside Lightroom or Photoshop, really becoming almost like a digital artist on top of my own image, not adding things, but bringing out and exaggerating, I guess is the right word, contours and light and colors and textures within the landscape photograph. Whereas the Pursuit of Equilibrium series, at least chapter 1 that I've introduced with the pendulums and light, is really about being as purist as possible and not altering what the fundamental laws of the universe want to create, and more just capturing it. And my creativity there goes into like engineering the systems, like the pendulum, the Blackburn pendulum, and then injecting different patterns and colors of light. But as far as like the actual patterns, I try to keep my hands out of that one and let the universe do what it's going to do.
I mean, it's so interesting because what I'm like, when I see both of your works, I think light. And to me, it's fat. So how do you go about like choosing? So Ben, for you, is there a way and a process and you're like, okay, I want to have this color. Like I would like to really have blue, or you just sort of kind of let the lights guide it. And then Michael, for you as well, when you're sitting in post-production, do you already have like an idea of the like the feeling you want to emulate, or you just kind of, you go with it as you're editing?
Let's see. As far as the colors go, honestly, it doesn't. I think I just get bored of a certain color pattern and kind of color palette, and so I'll program something different into the RGB flashlight. But when I find a pattern that I really love, I think one of the ones is a 4:5 modal ratio, which produces these really insane, seemingly three-dimensional fabrics, which I haven't really shared much of because I've been keeping them for the next one of one. But when I find something that I really like, I'll run it through all kinds of color outputs just so that I have them. And I don't know. Yeah. So you could ask Ben Scar. I don't know if he's in here, but he's I've proposed many different color outputs, and the order in which I release them as one of ones. I want to make sure they look good next to each other within the collection and not hit too many in a row. So a lot of that influences where I go with color there. Yeah, I'll let Michael jump over on his color theory.
I want to ask you, do you have different like lights now from when you first started that you can like choose from, and like have you upgraded or fiddled with the pendulum at all?
I still use the I think it's called Ants on a Melon. I know a lot of light painters know this. It's like you can put all these attachments on it too. That's how those light painters do those light wands and stuff. But it's a pretty capable RGB flashlight. I've messed with a lot of lenses that I've created to put on it, and ultimately found that a 2mm crystal ball at the end of a blacked out PVC pipe that I've closed on both ends, but just like a pinhole, 2mm diameter, where I've adhered a 2mm crystal ball lens, makes a really nice pinpoint, and it actually helps distribute the light even when the pendulum's at a really intense angle from the camera lens, so you don't get like that huge fall off of light as the pendulum moves away from the camera. But other than that, the actual light sources, I don't think I could do any better than Ants on a Melon. They have a really nice RGB flashlight that you can program color sequences into and blink patterns. But I keep coming up with crazy ideas. It's hard when you live in a 800 square foot townhome with a 2-year-old because it's like, where am I going to find the room and the darkness to shoot these? So I usually do it when the wife and the baby are out of town, and I do it in his bedroom because he has light blocking curtains to block out like any ambient street light. But I think next, something I've been really fascinated by in trying to perfect, which I still have yet to do, which I'll admit, is capturing the painting of the pendulums live. I've showed a few videos on Twitter just through like cell phone footage where I do frame echoing. And you can actually watch the pendulum draw out in real time the pattern. And it just hits such a different level with the viewers. It's way more captivating to watch the pendulum actually draw itself out. So I've been trying to figure out how to capture that with, high resolution outputs, and with a lens that when the light's directly over it, which on the cell phone, it just kind of blows it out and you get a bunch of lens flare, and I don't want that. But that's kind of the next thing that I'm really doing to evolve the pendulum concept. And then I'll probably, so a lot of people don't know this, but I have a pretty intense music background. I have a couple degrees in music performance. And so I probably want to start scoring things or improvising on piano as I watch these outputs, and then use that as a track against the piece.
Ben, I feel like you're being very modest when you say you have a few degrees. I don't think many people know, but I want to say you're like a jazz aficionado and you're being very humble. But for those who don't know, I mean, Ben, your mind just really, I could sort of sit in there. I would love to just sit in your brain and sort of see how it's wired and what you think and how you think and what you conceptualize. But yeah, for those who don't know, you have like a full master's, if not more, with music, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but
yeah, I spent 6 years in jazz performance and classical. So I think with the music on this piece, I would definitely do kind of free improvisational on piano, not jazz probably, but more like, I don't even know what you'd call it, harmonic progression, kind of new world floaty vibes, I guess. Yeah, I'm just watching Julio and Ashton go to fucking town on their emojis down here. It's pretty funny. But yeah, so I wanted to jump over to Michael, and because no one does it like Mind's Eye when it comes to, and we've talked countless hours. I don't know, we've probably spent, I wouldn't be surprised if it's got to be over 100 hours on the phone together just over the last couple of years. But yeah, just color theory. And light bleeding is a whole nother topic we'll get to later today in this space, but just like the color theory is insane. It's very cinematic and perfectly moody. Yeah, I'll hand it over.
like, how do you conceptualize? Like when you sit behind your computer after you've shot, you're like, okay, this is the feeling I'm trying to emulate. Or when you're capturing, like there's this one photograph that you have taken, and I feel like everybody knows the photograph. Let me see if it's not pinned anymore to your Twitter, but it's this incredible shot. And it's just, you're looking down at this man walking with like a bowler hat almost, I believe, or like a fedora. Okay. And it's this just like, so when you shoot that, like, how are do you see the scene? You're like, okay, this is the moment that I need to capture. And then you go in post and you sort of edit the light to give you that very, like Ben said, cinematic feeling, or do you see the shot and you know how it's going to look post and you kind of use light to edit? And
okay. It's kind of complicated, I guess. There's no one answer, right? There are some scenes that are just perfect, like as is. You shoot it and it's like it's already almost there as soon as you bring it into your computer. So that scene was pretty much perfection already. So like I was talking to some people. I told them it took me an hour to from start to finish with processing, and they were like, they couldn't believe it, right? But there's other pieces that I make that have a similar look, and it'll take me weeks, and maybe I'll never be satisfied. Like I have like a slew of images that I've been working on for months, even, and they're like close, but they're just like not there yet. So there's always like a certain look I want, but depending on the conditions, the live conditions and the way that the files were captured, it could take minutes or it could take years. I don't know, but I do have like an idea ahead of time of like how I want things to look. So it's just a matter of like, pushing and pulling like each image to get there, I guess. There's certain colors I like to use, but that's like always evolving as well. So currently I'm using like kind of like a desaturated blue as like for like all of the shadows and all of the blues in the scene, and then like nice warm yellow orange kind of glowing light in all the light sources, and then throughout the scene like a third complementary color to balance everything out, which sometimes it's there when you shoot it, and sometimes it's just not there at all, and you kind of have to paint it in by yourself. So, and that takes time. So, but then again, like styles change, right? So, like a year ago, I really loved like saturated kind of royal blue color, and like more saturation throughout, right? And so if you look at my images from like 2020, 2019, they're a lot more colorful and bright and had more contrast. But now I look back at them, I'm like, I don't really love that anymore. So, but I don't know where I'm going to be like a year from now, right? So it's just this snowball that's just rolling down the hill, and we don't know where it's going, kind of thing.
I feel like that's such a great lesson also for artists too, because so quickly and so easily we can get pigeonholed into sort of a style, or especially if, you have certain collectors who love your work, right? And they'll always gravitate towards a certain style. And I think as artists, we're always testing and trying. And like Ben, it's so interesting to see you've done this pursuit of equilibrium, but then you've done incredible landscape photography, as well as using technology to, change with the moon phases and with the day and night, and you're pioneering transient labs. And I just think it's so great that we all can see. A couple questions for you. First, I want to ask, how do you get into a creative mode? So for me, what's really interesting is I'm definitely more of the kind of, I'll be hunting, if you will. So I'm like low in the grass. I'm very calm, very quiet. And then I kind of get this like spring of energy and inertia to like, okay, now this is what I'm going to do. And I create, and then I go back into this very sort of calm, if you will, like waiting for that creative ebb and flow. Now for both of you, how do you work? Are you constantly creating and just always using your cameras and conceptualizing? Curious how you work.
Well, for me, I like to think of creativity as almost like this like power generator that's always like running in the background. Like it's always there, right? And I'm always working on something that contributes to my work. So whether I'm like on a trip and I'm in like shooting mode, right? And I'm not thinking about like editing much at all. I'm just trying to capture as many scenes and stories as possible. Like that's where my focus is then. And then like if I get home and I'm not going to be shooting for a bit, I'm pouring into post-processing and seeing like what I could conceive like with the files I've captured. And then when I'm driving around like Toronto, right, I'm just in like scouting mode, so like looking for things that might have potential for like a next piece. And then, sometimes I find myself like doom scrolling, right? Like just on the sofa. I'll try to pull myself out of that by just going like on like Google Earth or Maps to a place I've always wanted to visit, and then just kind of like going through the streets and looking for like compositions there. And then like almost that like creates like my travel plans moving forward. I even do that like in like little towns like around Toronto. So always like I always have this like creativity kind of going in different ways. But then you have these like aha moments like within all of that, and then like a piece is born, I guess. So that's kind of how it works for me. So it doesn't really shut off, but like it runs at, I guess, at different frequencies, at different times.
Let's see. I've gone through many phases, I guess. I used to obviously always obsess about every sunset and sunrise, and I had to capture them because I lived like right up against the mountains. So I'd always have my eye on the sky and kind of just watching. And especially when I'm camping, it's almost like a blessing and a curse where you go camping with a family. And every landscape photographer knows what I'm talking about. If you go hiking or camping with like a non-photographer friend or family, you're just like constantly FOMOing over like getting to a certain spot or just capturing something, especially the sunset looks like it's about to light up. And so it definitely used to be a super, like very, very bad case of that FOMO, and had to always be somewhere during sunset to capture something. But honestly, that phase has kind of subsided, and I'm sure it'll be back. But given like everything on my plate, it's really transitioned into like I'm always still definitely always creating. Luckily, I have a huge backlog of landscape photography to just work on and post process. But honestly, the only thing I take my camera out for nowadays is the pendulum stuff, just because it's at my house and more convenient, and it's just kind of where I'm at right now. And obviously, building a Web3 company, not just a Web3 company, but trying to constantly push boundaries, productize every innovation we make, and really turn this space kind of on its head and redefine what people think of when it comes to creating in Web3. You can imagine that takes up like 150% of the 24 hours I have in a day. So it's the creation process has never stopped. It just happens to be in a different medium now, and a lot of it is coding. So a lot of creating happening with artists in collaboration with projects they're trying to bring to life. New dynamic concepts, new smart contract concepts. I mean, I've got some pretty wild generative art ideas that I haven't even touched yet. Not that I would do them for myself, but I'll often think of these kind of things and put them in a backlog. And then when I'm talking to artists on a daily basis that come through the Transient Labs ecosystem or start deploying on their own creator sovereign contracts, I'll kind of wait for the right opportunity and present a lot of those concepts if it makes sense with someone else's project. But they're oh, go ahead.
I feel like you especially are just totally, when we think of innovation, we think of creativity in terms of like technological advancement, it's Transient Labs. So you the whole team, and you guys have had the pleasure of working with the team and just seeing what goes into creating. And I don't think people understand what is coming too, like what is about to sort of be introduced is just wildly exciting for every creator. So big love to the team there.
Thanks, Ayla. Yeah, we've had back and forth too, trying to come up with fun concepts for some of your pieces.
I'm gonna. Don't wanted to interrupt you, but I have a bit of a hot spicy question, and there's no right, there's no wrong answer because there's so many different outlooks. But I'm curious what you both think when you think of or let me rephrase this. What does one of one mean to you?
Are you referring to the tweet you tweeted?
I'm just curious in general. What does one of one mean to you? There's literally no wrong answer. It's however you think about it. I'm just very curious. Your two thoughts.
I've always been of the mindset that one of one, it lives two different meanings, whether it's in the physical or the digital realm. So I've never, to answer your question about your tweet, to be honest, because I've discussed that with other artists as well. If you release a one of one digital artwork as an NFT, then yeah, it should remain a one of one, of course, in the digital in the Web3 realm, like on the blockchain. Should be the only token that represents that artwork. But if you're now the question, like, can you print physicals for that piece that are maybe an open edition? And the way that I think about that, if they're digitally native and they're one of ones on the blockchain, is that the print is more like a poster almost, or like I hate to use the word souvenir because it kind of like devalues the print, which I'm not using it in that context. But when you go see something like the Declaration of Independence, you can get, a replica Declaration of Independence. And what does that do in the long run? Provenance wise, I think it only increases the value of the original. So I, as a collector and as an artist, would never have qualms about artists printing one of ones, even if they wanted to just mass produce them. If I own the original NFT that those one of ones are printed, or sorry, those prints are printed off of, then it would just increase the value of the original token. But then if you are physically native and you make a piece and it is numbered as a one of one in the traditional art realm, then it should remain a one of one. And in that case, the only time an NFT should also exist of that physical one of one is if it is representing it in like a certificate of authenticity kind of way. So kind of like the trace concept that we're building at Transient. So yeah, it's a complicated answer.
No, that was great. It was such an interesting question that I find and I love to discuss. Michael, what are your thoughts? I'm curious. And just in general, like when you hear one of one, what does that mean? It doesn't need to be digitally native, but curious.
Well, I think my answer is the same pretty much as Ben's answer. I mean, I just, I've sold a few one of one pieces over the years, let's say like 20-ish. And I just put out, my first like coffee table art book. And, one of the pieces that was collected ended up on the cover. And like the collector is like super excited that happened. Like, and like, he's like, there's no issue there between like him owning that piece and like wanting to like lock it into a vault so no one can ever see it again, and like it being like hopefully on like as many coffee tables as possible across the world, right? So, but yeah, like Ben used the Declaration of Independence, and like I like to use the Mona Lisa, I guess. Cliche, but as an example, like there's one, it's a one of one, it's hanging in the Louvre, right? But like you can go to the gift shop and buy mugs and shirts and posters or whatever, right? And then everyone takes those home and like, maybe somebody who doesn't know what the Mona Lisa is, like sees that mug, right? Asks what it is. It only increases like the popularity. So, and hopefully the value, even though it's priceless, but still. But yeah, I feel like as long as it remains a one of one in the realm in which it was created, which is on the on blockchain, then that's fine. I do think there's like other issues there, like if you minted a one of one on like Ethereum, I don't think you can then mint it on like Solana as well, right? So like there is a difference between like digital and physical, right? But yeah, pretty much everything Ben said.
I love that. I love how you said, as long as it remains of one where it was created. I think that's very poignant. I'm going to pivot a little bit. Ben, did you have something to say? I saw you.
Yeah, I was just going to answer your original question. What one of one means, I guess, thinking about it a little bit, is there should only be one representation of the source of truth. Like there should only be one thing, digital or physical, that is claiming to be the source of truth. That is the one of one. Now that doesn't count for prints that are pointing back to that one of one, but that's one of one.
Perfect. That was so beautifully articulated. Thank you. I truly love that. I'm going to pivot a little bit, and then I would love to get into sort of how what you guys talk about and find interesting together. But as we obviously all together move in time and grow older, I'm curious, as artists, like, how do you keep that wonder alive? And how do you keep your sort of thirst for knowledge awake, especially when you're tired and there's so much to do, or there's like a lull in terms of like self-doubt? What do you do to keep that kind of spark alive?
Okay. Well, I would say it's like you just got to keep going, right, and not get bogged down by any stresses. Like, you know your mission. Well, I know my mission, right? It's just to keep creating, and I just don't let myself get into like, like, what am I trying to say? Like go down the wrong road and get distracted from that. As long as I keep that ball rolling, I'll keep myself inspired, and then from that I'll keep creating, right? And like I said, like earlier, I'll catch myself like doom scrolling or doing something that like does not contribute to that, and then I'll try to catch myself and then pull myself back into the back along the right path. So as long as I could just keep doing that forever or until my days are done, then I should be good, right? So, I mean, that's kind of how I'm managing it now. So.
I feel like I need to like meditate on that question, Ayla. I think I'm just drinking from a fire hose all the time. I have no choice whether or not I want to consider my thirst for knowledge. Like, there's so many things constantly happening in this space, and especially on the technical side, that it's just like I don't even have a chance to slow down.
Because I remember we were talking about elasticity and and I was curious, how, because as you get older, your brain, quote unquote, kind of hardens a little bit, if you will, and your ability to learn gets less and less unless it's like a muscle, unless you exercise it and keep it elastic and kind of moving. So curious just how you keep up with that.
Yeah, how you don't get burnt out and stuff. Maybe I was kind of curious. I don't even know. I was trying to think about like what actually drives me to want, like right now, for example, before this space, I'm just sitting here battling React. It's like a JavaScript kind of framework to create a brand new Mint experience. Just like a concept I had a while back. So I'm trying to actually bring it to life. But then if I stop and I'm like, what's driving me to do this other than like, oh, maybe it'll just help. One thing, of course, is it'll help one more artist kind of stand out from the crowd and do something unique. But there's still something else there underlying, like why I want to learn new concepts. And learning's always painful, I think, for the most part. Like, it's obviously can be enjoyable because it's like true accomplishment. It's like a sense of, it's not cheap happiness, and not monetarily speaking cheap, but like anyone can go out and, buy some, I'm going to use like not like a fancy car example, but like say you did have a bunch of money, you could just go out and buy a brand new car. That's kind of like pretty shallow, temporary dopamine hits. Or like true satisfaction and content comes from things that you have to suffer through to like gain and grow as an individual. And I think learning is one of those. It's always hard to learn a new thing, but there's something like this, the happiness and the satisfaction that comes from accomplishing those kind of feats lasts much longer and has a totally different, chemical makeup in your brain than like the cheap dopamine hits. I think that's probably what keeps the thirst of knowledge going from a primal perspective. But it also has some really awesome, side effects, like producing really cool, innovative features and contracts and mint mechanics and dynamic works, and then that helps other artists realize dreams that were never possible before. And it's kind of like what all Transient Labs is built on. But yeah, you just got to make sure you don't get burnt out. This is why I play golf with Paul on a frequent basis. But yeah, it's
I've never understood golf,
good.
and I think it's such an interesting game, if you will, because I know there's a lot of focus, but when you go out there I've heard it from numerous people, when you're out there on the field, I guess it's and you've told me this too, Ben, like the world falls away and you really just are in the full present moment.
Yeah, it's not, you make it sound relaxing. It's not always relaxing. Paul and I definitely have our days, but it's really, it's very poetic. I know it sounds weird. Even my wife, who plays golf, laughs at me when I call golf poetry. But it is. It's like chess. It's strategic. You have to shut your brain off and turn it on at the same time. It's kind of like photography or just art in general. It can be very technical, like right-brained and left-brained at the same time. And then you're outside. Yeah, you can't really think about much of anything else. And I don't know. It's always painful, but those moments of bliss are that much better, which is what keeps you coming back. And yeah, it's a good sport. It can raise your blood pressure though, sometimes. But
as all things do. I mean, it sounds I feel like I'm getting like a very Nietzsche type feeling from you in terms of like suffering, and within that suffering there's meaning, and kind of always chewing at that.
Yeah, I mean, the one analogy I read or heard once, I have no idea where I remember it from. Probably like a book or a podcast. But the concept of joy and suffering in life, like if you were always happy, it would get pretty boring. It's pretty vanilla experience in life. And the analogy that I really liked and has stuck with me is you don't notice your shoes on your feet most of the time. You'll just totally forget about it because they're just comfortably tight or comfortably loose. But if you spent all day and you intentionally tied your shoelaces like extremely tight where it was just uncomfortable, and then you later take off your shoes, that like relief, that moment of joy of just taking your shoes off and realizing what no pressure on your feet feels like, you would just be that much more in the moment during those times, walking around your house, feeling like you're floating on air. Whereas we just wear our shoes at a comfortable, tightness, as you should. So when you take your shoes off at home, you really don't notice it much, and you just kind of go on with your night. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Like you have to have a fair amount of suffering's a weird word, but you have to have a fair amount of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and going through those growth pains, so that when you do hit those milestones and get those moments of like bliss in your life, it's that much better. Just like taking your shoes off if you intentionally wore them super tight all day. It's just a weird thing. I don't know why it's stuck in my head and I think about it more than I'd like to admit, but yeah, it's a cool analogy.
No, I really love that. And especially as a woman who wears very high heels, that feeling of floating in bliss when you take your shoes off at the end of the night is bar none amazing. So, Michael, curious your thoughts. What do you do?
What are your thoughts on shoe tightness, Michael?
Shoe tightness. Well, I wear mine pretty loose, so I would probably appreciate that. Um, And that actually had me thinking, like, I kind of want to try that, to be honest. But yeah. Sorry, can you repeat? Apologies. Could you repeat like the original question? I'm like caught up on the shoes now.
Totally. No, the essence of the question is just like, as you grow older and as you're sort of, the wonder of life kind of disappears and reality sinks in. Like, how do you keep, especially as artists, like how do you keep that alive and awake, and what do you do to keep your brain elastic? And
okay. Oh, okay. That was okay. I thought I answered that one.
Did he answer it? Am I repeating myself?
No, but it's no, but yeah, maybe to just expand on it, I guess. Like it's like it's like exercise, right? Like whatever you're involved with, right? Like you just have to kind of keep at it. Like it's or else you kind of fall out in a way. It's like going to the gym and like if you're working out for like 2 years and then you just like stop, right? Like you're probably going to like fall out of shape like compared to what you are right now, right? So it's kind of the same thing, and it can be for anything like creativity or for whatever it is you're into. So if you believe in like what you're doing and like you kind of shaped your whole life around it, like you gotta kind of just keep practicing it, and like in any way you can. Like there's gonna be slow days that kind of suck, and you feel like burned out, and you don't know what's gonna happen next. But you just kind of maybe pivot to another side of like the industry you're in, and like especially as like a freelancer like myself, if I'm not in like 100% art mode, I'll go into like administration mode, and I'll try to get myself like I'll stop for a sec. Like once a month, I send out like pitch emails to every tourism board contact that I have, like all over the world, and I'll try to get the next job, right? Because I work in like travel and tourism, doing travel photography. That's like my source of income outside of NFTs, right? And so when I don't have like the next trip coming or the next or I finished like the campaign I was just working on, and I'm not feeling creative, then I'll just jump into like that side of the business where I have to kind of grind to get myself new work, and then that will lead to a campaign where then I have to get creative again, right? So kind of just finding ways to bounce around within your realm to keep the ball moving, I guess. I also like to pivot from that. I also enjoy cooking. I feel like that's like creative, and it helps me like learn techniques and new recipes, and I find that like very enjoyable as well. I know you from our group chat we're in.
I was just about to say it's great to have a fellow cook who just enjoys, because there's it's so funny. I'm really terrible at physics. I'm terrible at chemistry. I cannot count, but there's something so satisfying about baking and cooking, because you just sort of you can kind of be ratatouille once you get the recipe and you learn, and you can really start like improvising. But there's something about baking to me that is so satisfying, because you just follow the instructions and then poof, you have this like perfect cinnamon bun. So I find that really, really soothing.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of like back to basics, right? Where you just kind of, it's almost like a reset. Like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and here's the instructions, and then it's very satisfying, and you get to eat it, right? So.
Totally, you get to eat it, but it's also like it's somewhat of an instant gratification, if you will, especially because you take something from nothing and then you create this meal or this cake or a bread, and there's just a very wonderful dopamine hit because you're like, oh, I created this. So
right, exactly, and I like the the inspiration for that. Like on any given day, like you don't even know where it comes from. Like, you know what? I'm gonna make this tonight, and then you're just like at the grocery store, and you don't even know how you got there. And
totally. So now I read this quote, or I listened to some podcasts, and they were talking about this idea of, because of technology, there's such a surface level interaction with humans, right? We're all kind of so close, and we're, always around, but it's also very surface. And sometimes when you're walking in the street and a stranger, be like, oh, hey, like, do you want me to take your photo or something? You're like, ugh, why are you talking to me? Like, so I'm curious, how do you feel about this idea of technology and social media and how we maneuver through the world as humans? Like, how do you deepen that connection, or is it all deep in the end of the day? Like, do you find that?
Well, I think it's always going to be a different experience for everybody, right? One thing about photography that I've recognized is that it keeps you really hyper focused on the moment, like on the present, right? Like when I'm walking around, let's say Queen Street in downtown Toronto, and I don't have a camera, my mind might wander to like things I have to do tomorrow or whatever, right? Like any current events, or I might be like looking at my phone, and who knows, right? Like, but I'm just like I'm there, but I'm not like there. But when I have my camera in my hand, like everything changes. Like I'm looking for, at every, like as I'm walking, the scene is changing. I'm like observing the way the angles of the buildings and the way light is hitting at different angles. What each individual person is actually doing, the interactions they're having, like trying to see if like maybe that moment is a good moment to capture, right? So like I'm like hyper present, more so than like probably anyone else on that street at that time. So photography like definitely brings me back to reality. But then also it's like there's a balance, right? With technology. Like some of my friends in here can vouch like that I'll be like texting with them and then they'll just get a call from me because like I don't want to text all this. I just like let's just talk about it, right? Like it's so much easier, like such a better way to communicate. So of course you can't just do that with everybody on Twitter, but I wish that was more normal now, like I have a lot of friends that they'll text me like, I'm going to call you in 5 minutes. Okay, I'm calling you now. Or even like I'll invite people over and they'll text me when they're at the door instead of like ringing the doorbell. So I'm like, okay, like let's get back to like 1995 a little bit sometimes.
Like a human connection. I know it's such a funny thing because I don't think ever I've been more connected to people, if you will, but and the amount of friends I've made. And then when you go to NFT NYC or you go to Art Basel or you go to LA and you're having these meetings with people you've been speaking to, there is something so incredible about being there in the physical and like seeing your faces and that contact. But sometimes it just like, I find that we're almost scared to interact with you. Like you said, like, okay, I'm going to call you in 5 minutes. Like, no, just call me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I prefer that. I want to learn what people are really like, like there is kind of like a facade behind this, like, behind the I don't know, behind the handle or PFP, right? Like people are kind of projecting an image when they're online or even when you're just texting them. But like when you talk to people, you really understand what they're like, right? And especially in person. And that's how like, we've been forever, right? Like we always knew what people were like because we had to go up to them and talk to them. And but now things are changing in a I don't know. I don't really enjoy that too much, but I'm still trying to hold on to those human connections, I guess.
Which I love. And this almost feels like a perfect segue. Ben, I know I didn't let you answer the question, but I'll sort of segue this because you've told me you guys have spent hundreds of hours talking to each other on the phone. I'm very curious. what do you guys talk about, or what's a conversation that you both have had together that you are both still mulling over or you're finding interesting and you want to share it? I know there was a lot of topics, Ben, that you were like, I don't know what we could choose from, but I'm very curious what's something you two enjoy chatting about.
It's hard to pick from everything because we talk about stupid shit a lot, just like the value of this or that, or what is this, especially back in the PFP days. Just fun degen stuff. A lot of it's just about like kind of what we're each doing in terms of like artistic projection, I guess, or growth, and what's going to happen next. Or lately, I guess, we haven't been on the phone as much, which I actually thought about a couple days ago, and it bugged me. So I was like, I'm going to start just cold calling Michael more often. But yeah, just the concept of payload, which is like being able to I don't know, finance isn't the right word because you're not giving out a loan, but being able to like open up the opportunities that artists have to sell to more creators, like widen their collector base. Because now all of a sudden, imagine you can target the collectors who can't just buy your 5 ETH or even 1 ETH or piece just outright. And instead, you'll be able to lock it up in an entire contract system that can handle, monthly or weekly or whatever payments you agree upon with the collector or whatever you set as the artist. And so that's like the whole concept of payload, which is one of the products along with Trace and Launchpad in the lab that we're building for. A lot of this is going to go public next year. So that's been something we've been kind of really talking about lately. And I don't know, just it'll help creators for sure reach a wider collector base, and just makes sense to have in this space when you're dealing with really expensive artwork. It's not like not many people go and buy houses outright in cash. That's why there's such a thing as a mortgage, but there's like no such thing as any like financing or mortgage really in NFTs and art. And how do you do that without a loan? Because loans are nasty. So that's kind of what Payload's about. Not fronting the money, but being able to track on-chain payments through the contract.
That came from like we were just like on the phone for like 3 hours one day, and I told him about some conversations I had with collectors and liquidity, and how like some people want my work but like they just can't afford it right now. And I was saying, I just like spat it out, like like I wish like people could just like pay for my work, like I finance my car, right? Or lease my car, and then it kind of like took off from there, and hopefully that's out soon. So I think that'll be a game changer. Oh, I already know it will be. I've talked to a few collectors about it already, and open up so many opportunities for artists.
Yeah, and it's definitely
at any price point. Like yeah.
I'm excited. I was looking at since we talked yesterday, I was looking at the state of it right now, and it's actually looking really good. I'm excited you got to do a bit more styling and branding and stuff of the actual website, but not only will you be able to as a creator, create these payload listings on any of your one-of-ones, even if they're listed on another marketplace. But if the collector buys into it, let's just say you have a payload listing. It's like, oh yeah, I have a 10 ETH piece, but you can either buy it, hit the reserve auction, or, pay with payload, and it's 1 ETH a month for 10 months. Maybe that's the term you set, for example. So if I, as the collector, buy that, under those agreements, and then 2 months in, something happens and I need to get out. We've created it as such that it comes with a representative token of the artwork that you're paying off, and you can sell that token on secondary to another collector who can carry on the payments for you, or it's now theirs. So they can either pay it all off or they can buy that from you and just continue paying until it's done. So you can like transfer your debt, and I air quoting debt here because it's not really debt because there's no loans, but you can transfer your payment plan to another collector and sell it on secondary like OpenSea. And it fully operates on delegate cash too. So you can, if Michael, if I have a piece of his and I'm paying for it under payload and he wants to do an airdrop, I can still participate in that by using a delegate wallet if I have it like locked up in cold storage or something. So yeah, it's pretty excited for that. So that's one of the things. This is an example of stuff that we talk about, but that's more like that's a more noble thing. We definitely talk about silly shit and like what's the future of PFPs? Are they going to come back? Or like art in general, what direction is it going to head? What's the next bull cycle going to look like?
Share. Have any thought? I'm curious. I mean, first of all, that sounds incredible. This pay, I mean, game changer for sure. And I think it's just another avenue to get artwork out there and also legitimize the space. So huge. And I want to say lots of alpha happening always with you, Roger, on Artifix and the future of art. So this is really exciting. And then, yeah, what are your thoughts on the future of the space and art, and where are we going?
Let's see. I mean, a lot of people don't think PFPs will make a full comeback. It's hard to tell, though. And I guess I think the next bull cycle there will be a lot more people involved. So the question is, will they fall into the same kind of FOMO gambling addictions that we did with PFPs in 2021? I don't know if it's honestly healthy for the space. It wasn't, it kind of wreaked havoc the last time it happened. And then of course mainstream media that's all they talk about is how your monkey JPEGs are worthless now. And so the main public, like my in-laws and people who aren't into the space, all that they know about is like, oh, well, aren't NFTs worthless? Like it was just a stupid technology and everyone's stuff's at zero now. And so they just miss the entire point of how revolutionary this tech is and what the blockchain means for a consensus mechanism ledger that is fully decentralized and the world needs this kind of stuff now, but it can just revolutionize almost every modern industry. That shit doesn't get talked about because all that people talk about is the PFP craze that went up and then came crashing down. So I don't know if I want that for the next bull cycle. I don't think art is going anywhere. That's always a really strong use case and very healthy for this space. And it's kind of like the catalyst for this tech going mass or going wide, kind of like being mass adopted. And I think the next bull cycle will see it just hit a lot more use cases, like NFTs in general, in smart contracts. I think gaming NFTs will be pretty big during the next cycle. I think we'll see a lot of companies kind of start to transfer a lot of their databases onto blockchain infrastructures. And I mean, I'm already seeing it happening behind the scenes. It's just something that media doesn't pick up on. And things like selling houses and real estate, storing health insurance and crash records for vehicles on chain, like all this kind of stuff, I think we'll see a lot more of during this next cycle. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts, Michael? You think apes are gonna get back up to 100 ETH?
that would be up to the gamblers, I guess. I mean, you can't discount like you know, people wanting to gamble, right? Like that's always going to be there. So like PFPs will probably not go anywhere, but yeah, like maybe we'll see a little maturity in the space, like moving forward. At least I'm hoping so. Like NFTs are, you know, they can be many things at once, right? And so I feel like maybe a separation between what each asset is and represents and means, like, will be more clearly defined moving forward. And then like hopefully we get to a point where people don't have a choice or an opinion on it anymore, and it just becomes like normal life. Like I remember people were debating whether to get on Facebook or Instagram. Now it's just like you kind of have to, right? Like if you have a business, how are you going to exist without social media, right? So if driver's licenses become NFTs, like anyone who has a driver's license will not have a choice between, you know, choosing to use one or not, right? And if every artist in the world like adopted this and started minting their work, then the art collector world would have to gravitate towards NFTs, and it wouldn't be a thing anymore or a debate. It would just be like, I'm buying this art. This is how I buy it, right? And then yeah, there's always people gambling with like Pokemon packs, and there's a collector world out there that buy baseball cards that are expensive, and like yeah, most baseball cards are worthless, right? Like I have thousands of them from when I was a kid, right? But there are a few like Michael Jordan rookies that are worth something. And maybe those will be worth $1 million, like if they're not already someday. So we just kind of have to, you know, mature. Everyone has to kind of redefine what NFTs mean, and but I do think like this is the future in many different aspects. So I don't think it's going anywhere, but it's I don't know how to close this out, but like yeah, we're going somewhere.
You know, for sure. And what's interesting, it's something that I consider a lot too, this idea of constantly like we need mass adoption, we need mass, like let's bring the general population into this space. And I agree with that, but I still think we as a very small niche culture, like you said, right, is define kind of our values and what it means to be in our artist space, if you will. And then of course, like gambling will forever be something. I don't think, I think we're going to see always some shitcoin or some pump, and maybe it won't be like it will make certain people rich. And I think that's just in the psychology of humans, is this idea of hope and the quick flip, especially with, I would say, this new generation. I sound like an old lady saying this new generation, but like, I think they have something where they just, I don't know, with TikTok and being able to make money so quickly online, I think there is that. But I do think that we and it's starting to happen, right? You're kind of having this from 2021, we're sort of feeling this moment of people breaking off into their own niche in their own ways. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like even today, right? Like if I tried to convince like all these friends I had in high school to buy all these packs of baseball cards, they still think I'm crazy for something like that, right? Like, so like each sector of NFTs, right, is always going to be questionable to the general public, right? Like, but eventually, like things kind of get normalized, and eventually, in some ways, everyone will own an NFT for something that represents something that they, possess in their life, right? Like if it's like a deed to a house or a driver's license or their medical info, right? So, but right now, everyone just thinks NFTs are Pokemon cards, so that's kind of where the public is on it, but. But yeah,
So
like it's up to us to kind of onboard, like, and convince like people who are interested in art that this is a legitimate industry and technology.
I mean, it's slowly happening. If you see, for example, like Rafik and MoMA, or Tyler Hobbs, or Goose selling it. All of these moments that are huge are slowly changing, and it takes time to change the tides, but for sure it will. Any art sale, I think, is always a positive, right? It's always a step in that right direction. You're putting your money where your mouth is, and here, this is the art. Yeah. So,
well, I think any traditional artist, like, adopting the technology is a win, right? Because then you slowly win over the collectors of that artist. So, and that's how our side of the space grows.
So, slowly, kind of going to ask a few more questions as we round out this wonderful conversation. I have a couple things. I meditate on this for a little bit, and I'm just very curious. What do you link value to, and what do you consider valuable? And then, Ben, this is a question to you because I'm just genuinely curious. What stories are you reading your son?
The Big Bad Robot. I don't know if that means anything to anybody.
No, I don't think I read Big Bad Robot.
It's his favorite book. And like, he's 2.5, so he's just getting proud of his sentences he's putting together. It's a pretty cool book. It's kind of it's a spin-off of the Three Little Piggies, but instead it's the three little aliens and a big bad robot in space. The art is actually really good. No, he just likes the big bad robot.
That's wonderful. And how do you feel? Like, again, I remember hearing you talk about this, just like seeing the world through his eyes. I feel like that just keeps you awake and kind of in wonder too.
Yeah, it's always good to, it's kind of an excuse as a parent to return being a child. And it's fun without being looked at weird. Like, I can go down slides at playgrounds and do stuff without the parents being like, what the hell is this weirdo doing at our park? So it's fun. Yeah, and he's just growing more every single day. Super smart kid. And it's good for life balance. Otherwise I would just like work too much.
Do you both consider yourself workaholics? Like, is that something that is just always there? You're always working and can't turn off, and it's like, I have to turn off? Or
you mean like us, like Michael and I?
Mm-hmm.
I thought you were asking about Bear. I was like, I don't know about Bear. I mean, I guess he's a workaholic because he's obsessed with learning, but that's healthy behavior for a 2-year-old. Yeah, I think I definitely am. But I enjoy the times with like family is just most important, to be honest. I feel like it always has been.
Yeah, that's a value I find really, that's something that I know that you value very high, and I really respect that. You've got a very clear boundary, like weekends is for family and I won't be working, kind of.
And like 6 p.m. and on. Like, I'm excited for ETH to go to $50,000 a coin so we can all retire and spend time with our families and just innovate freely. But yeah, that's definitely the workaholic. Always thinking about it, thinking about stuff. And I have fun with it, of course. Like, I came up with a new genre of artwork last week. It could be a bold claim. I don't know if it's brand new. I'm sure someone's done it. But I'm going to be doing actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to say who I'm doing this with. Probably shouldn't say it. I'm releasing an art piece with some entity, and it's a new form of. It uses my pendulum artwork, but it's dynamic, and I may, like I said, I may not be the inventor of this, but just for right now, I'm just gonna say I accidentally invented a new genre that I'm calling infinite glitch art, and it's pretty sick. So it uses code to actually uses pseudo random algorithms in code to generate the glitch fragments and decide which frames happen where, and it's glitch art, but it's never the same twice, ever. Every time you load it, no matter who's viewing it, if you leave it open forever, it just will infinitely keep glitching, but never the same twice in a row. So I'm calling it infinite glitch art. And I think it's going to be one of the dynamic art tools in the lab after I showed it with the team, because it was just an idea I had and couldn't get out of my head. So I built it over the weekend. And I think it's going to be pretty sick. I'd like to see what people do with it. Feed it their images and their artworks and generate these infinite glitch pieces.
I feel like there's a few people I could think who it would be with, but I think you're just hilarious because you're just like, yeah, I just casually built it over the weekend. Like that's huge. That's really exciting. And again, I feel like Roger and Artifacts team just dropping amazing alpha. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll wrap it up. I know time is sort of the essence, and I really appreciate everyone who's been here and the incredible crowd who's listening, and you too. I feel like I could listen to you both forever. And back to that question of what do you link value to, and what do you, just as a person, consider to be valuable?
Okay, so value in which way?
I think more just sort of like your personal like values. I mean, you could, if you like, I really link value to owning a home or such, but I think more just in terms of like personal values, and as an artist, what are sort of core things that you abide your life by in a way?
It's a tough one, I think. I would just say like satisfaction on like any given day, I guess. Every day has its challenges, and it's like it's it's goals, right? Like you wake up, you have these grand ideas some days, and other days are like kind of lazy, right? But as long as like you could feel good about what you're doing and accomplishing like something, no matter what it is, and like laying your head down at night and feeling like content and good about that, I think there's value there. But it's always it's not something you can just define as like a certain event, right? So like there's days where I want to like create like a really ambitious piece, and like if I do it, I'll feel great. But there's days like I just want to do I just want to make like selections of like 15 buildings in like a file that I shot, and then like work on that piece with those selections for the next week or so, and I might feel like that is satisfying. So or it could be making cinnamon buns, right? So it could be anything. Just at the end of the day, like feeling you did something good.
I love that. I think that's beautiful. Ben, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, I value. I feel like we're getting ready for Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for.
It's perfect. No, but just like you crack me up. You're really making me laugh here. I'm trying to hold it together.
Yeah, I value health for sure. Like one of my life goals. I mean, it sounds funny, but okay. So yeah, one of my big goals, and just why I wake up in the morning and grind as hard as I do. One of them is to support my family, of course, in like one of the huge milestones. Because believe it or not, despite how much you might see transient labs all over the space doing all kinds of projects, all of that revenue goes straight back into just building transient labs. So I'm still sitting here, unable to buy my my family a house, because we're living in like an 800 square foot townhome. So one of my huge goals, hopefully, at least by the next bull cycle, is to be able to buy that house for my family and make some, kind of realize all this work we're putting in and cash out some of this quote unquote monopoly money or whatever, and make some life-changing decisions and whatever. But even if you have like your dream home, if you don't have your health to go along with it and you feel like shit every day, then like all of that just doesn't matter. So I think above all, and the same goes with, like, of course, my family's probably second to health in terms of value, only because if you don't have good health, it's hard to be present with your family. So yeah, I would say that's just like, you have to feel good in your skin or everything sucks. So I try to prioritize health, and I suck at it sometimes. I have too much cortisol flowing through my veins on a day-to-day basis, just from anxiety and stress. It's what this space will do to us, especially when you're both an artist and a technical founder. So I'm competitive. So I'm competitive in all kinds of things, and always worrying that, we'll make one wrong move and everyone will just hate Transient Labs or whatever it might be. All this kind of crazy worry that goes on in my head. So I'm very aware of that. I can do better with like stress management. I try to definitely eat healthy and exercise regularly. Because gotta feel good to enjoy life.
I feel like that's such a great message, because we get so caught up and there's just so much happening and the world is changing. There's volcanoes and there's violence, and it's just like you can constantly, we live in this like perpetual state of like, and I think there's nothing better than that. Focus on your health, your family, your art. We didn't get into like color fading, but I know time is like ticking. So I think we'll have to save that for another space, because that is really interesting to me. And you, Ben, were talking about color and how in our last conversation, we were talking about like, why is the sky blue? And you were explaining it. And so I think that's such a great way to kind of bundle this and have another conversation for another time, because this has been incredible. And I just want to thank you both so much.
Thank you for joining us today. To explore more deep dives and engaging dialogues, visit the Future of Art podcast. If you are intrigued by our journey and wish to discover more about my work, I invite you to find me, Ayla El-Moussa, across all major platforms. And as we part ways for now, I leave you with a thought. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one small step. Until next time, let's keep the conversation alive and the inspiration flowing.